The Michigan Military and Veterans Hall of Honor is producing these videos to talk about inductees into the Hall of Honor. I am Jim Fausone, one of the board members of the Hall. We're recording these short videos and hoping that you'll find the information interesting enough that you'll go on the website and read more about these interesting men and women who have served in the military and done incredible things in the military or as veterans as they got out. We have more detailed stories on the website. Today, we're talking to two gentlemen who are going to explain to us about a couple of the inductees into the Hall. First up, Walter Orlane, who is a West Point graduate from 1965, who went on to be detailed off to the United States Air Force and ultimately retired as a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force Reserve. With him today is Mitch Bonnet. Mitch was also in the class of 1965. His assignments kept him in the Army, where he retired a lieutenant colonel in 1986. But both of you guys are here because of your long history with West Point Academy and, more importantly, the class of 1965. So first up, we'd like to talk about Joe Anderson, who was a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. Walter, why don't you tell us a little bit about Joe Anderson?
Well, Joe is also a part of the class of 1965, and he has been awarded the Distinguished Graduate Award from West Point, which is the highest honor bestowed on a graduate. So we started at West Point together in July of 1961, and fortunately for me, Joe and I were in the same regiment, the 1st Regiment, and I got to know Joe quite early and knew him all 4 years that we were at West Point.
Well, Joe served in Vietnam. He earned a couple of Silver Stars for his service. The Anderson Platoon is somewhat famous, based on a documentary called The Anderson Platoon about his service in Vietnam. Mitch, how do you think military life ended up shaping the career of Joe Anderson?
Well, I think Joe especially is one of those very driven guys to make sure the job gets done. And I remember for Joe, he was a White House fellow at one point. He worked for General Motors for a number of years. And then I had the opportunity because when he left General Motors, he set up a company of his own. I happened to be with a company at the time that provided him the financing to get that off the ground. And he visited that company, which took a tremendous amount of work and leadership from him. And of course, market conditions at some point, not his fault, but it changed things to a point where he had to take the company into bankruptcy. And then he took him out, and he got him out, and he kept going, and he kept growing, and he's done a phenomenal job as a business leader. He's also been a tremendous supporter of West Point in terms of resources and presenting to various groups for the Academy. Just a great guy to look at.
Walt, what do you find so inspiring about Joe Anderson that you think other people ought to delve deeper into his background, his career, his successes?
Well, Joe, as Mitch said, is as driven as anyone I've ever met. I mean, he rose in the era, and in our class, we had 5 minority cadets, African-American cadets, and Joe being one. And, we'd watch that and as easy to get along with. But when we talked later on, I mean, he made the comment once, I've been doing it all my life. And he has a background from his Kansas roots with the Brown versus education situation. So, he rose from things, and he was just blended right in, as he had the knack of doing in all of these endeavors. And militarily, he was always there. Had just that extra step that allowed notice. And when he took his commands, he was there. And the documentary, I distributed it. The Anderson Platoon, there was a French company that followed him over in Vietnam, and it's just a pleasure to be able to talk about him as a classmate and someone has inspired all of us. And we've had a great contact with him. I mean, he did things, as Mitch said too, like at West Point, he was part of the diversity movement. He would go back to West Point and speak in that arena. He actually was the lead speaker when they have the annual dinner honoring the first African-American graduate of West Point. His name was Henry Flipper. I believe the year was 1882. And Joe has been the main speaker for that, and that's quite an honor. So I'll think of more, but Joe Anderson is everything he's earned, and we wish him continued success.
Well, one of the things I want to come back to is the mention that he sort of comes out of humble Kansas roots, right? This guy didn't have a silver spoon in his mouth. This guy came from pretty simple Topeka, Kansas, and has risen to the pinnacle of business success. Mitch, you've watched that journey. What do you attribute that journey of business success to?
Well, in this challenging world we live in now, and has been for some time, he's been able to rise to the occasion. His ability to get along and work with a diverse group of people from a whole bunch of different companies. At one point, as I recall, he was working with companies in China and other parts of the world. His ability to negotiate in those environments and make things happen and build the companies to be very successful enterprises. And at some point, he sold those companies and moved on to other opportunities. He's, as far as I'm concerned, he's my version of hillbilly elegy in terms of what he's been able to accomplish and what he's been able to do.
Well, we'll leave it at this with Joe Anderson. If you are interested in an American success story, somebody from humble roots who learns a lot while he's in the military, is a great leader, and goes on to business success, you want to go on the website and read more about Joseph B. Anderson Jr.